Hereditary is back with top 4 paranormal activities of the day. Comment down if you had such experiences, subscribe to never miss an upload. Here we go. First event. My deceased grandmother came to visit my father as he was dying. In 2015, my father went through a bad alcohol withdrawal mixed with pneumonia which sent him to an intensive care unit, unconscious. At the time I was 16 years old and was trying to accept the fact that I had to say goodbye. I stayed in the hospital next to him each night until he passed. One day my 2 aunts, his sisters, came by together to say their goodbye. I greeted them at the hospital entrance, and escorted them over to my dad's room. Here's where things became unexplainable. As my aunts entered the room together, they both stopped dead in their tracks and looked at each other. Tears were rolling down one aunt's face, and the other was just awestruck. "Do you smell that?" one said to the other. "Yes, I do, it's her." Now, I had zero clue what they were talking about. It freaked me out, watching my aunts just stop and stare at each other, communicating seemingly without words. I finally asked, "What is going on? What are you guys talking about?" They explained to me that they could smell their mother's perfume. It was a scent that wasn't produced anymore, something they remembered from when they were children. I did smell a scent as well, but I figured it was one of the nurses. Once they explained to me how the scent was their mother's old perfume, the smell vanished. After acknowledging the smell, it went away. The 3 of us were immediately skeptical, and one of my aunts, the crazier one, subtly walked near each nurse working at the time to see if they had a similar perfume. Nope. There was no explanation we could think of, besides the fact that my grandmother's spirit was in that room, visiting my passing father for a moment. The fact that they both stopped at the same time, looked at each other and knew exactly what the other was thinking is what gets me. It's not like one mentioned it to the other and a type of placebo effect occurred, instead they had the same reaction at the same exact time. That's the key to the story that makes me believe. Second event. Encounter during nighttime security rounds at a museum. First off, I've always had a sensitivity to the paranormal. Odd premonition dreams, seeing shadow figures now and again, knowing when a spirit doesn't want me in an area, etc. I used to work at the Natural History and Art Museum in Pittsburgh, PA as a night security guard. The history portion was built in the early 1900s with the adjacent music hall being built in the late 1800s. For the almost 3 years I worked there, I've always felt that something was always around even though the museum was closed and empty as I did my rounds. On one of my rounds in the natural history portion, I went to exit an office room when I felt like I bumped into something. Immediately afterwards, a female voice said hello in a surprised manner. A little shaken, I checked the surrounding area in the hopes of debunking it. Nobody around but me. As I continued my rounds, I decided to ask if the spirit needed help or just wanted to chat. The flashlight I had on, which you had to twist to get from low to high to SOS, went from low to SOS and back 3 times while in my hand. Thinking that was a yes, I decided to chat with it and try to help whomever this was cross over. The whole round took over an hour, 30 minutes of it was spent chatting with the spirit that followed me around after the first encounter in that office. During that time, my flashlight did the low to SOS thing multiple times which eventually drained what was a full battery. By time my round ended, I felt whatever was around me dissipate. Sometimes, being sensitive to the paranormal sucks. When encounters like this happen, though, it makes it worthwhile. Hey there you, yes you please help me get 50 subscribers, subscribe now to get updated every day. Third event. The Redhead Man. Okay, so this is one of many but earliest experiences I have had with the paranormal and to this day it still haunts me. I used to dance, we practiced in a studio on the top floor of an old theater. I was about 12 years old and it was me and my best friend at the time that would go every Saturday together. We arrived late one Saturday, usually at the bottom of the stairs you pay but there was nobody there. We thought we must have been really late so we run up the 2 flights to the doors at the top that enters into the cloakroom, but as we got there we just saw darkness through the small round windows. I peered in, seeing nothing but black and looked back to my friend who shrugged but suddenly her eyes widened as she gazed beyond my shoulder. I followed her gaze back to the window where I locked my eyes onto a man. He had red hair and his eyes were wide and piercing green. He was somewhat see-through, like what I'd imagine a mirage in my mind. I felt like I couldn't look away but my logical brain took over and searched for a poster or something that he may have been reflecting from but there was nothing. I looked back and he blinked. I heard the rush of frantic footsteps starting down the steps as I realized I had been left alone and my friend had escaped. I took one last look at the man who at this point, I swear, had grown a smirk in the corner of his mouth, and that done it I followed suit. My heart was trying to break out of my chest as I sped after my friend. We didn't stop running until we were outside in the light and warmth. I said to her, What did you see? And she said, a man, I think. You see, it was different to looking through a window and seeing an actual person. This guy was faded, it was like a projection. We rang our parents from a payphone and asked them to come get us ASAP. We later found that the dance training was cancelled that week, but we both didn't get the memo. We lost contact after a few years but would still follow each other on social media. One night my curiosity got the better of me and I messaged her asking if she remembered what happened that day or if it was just a cause of my childhood imagination. She confirmed that she still had the image of the redhead man burned into her memory. Every time I think about him I feel a chill. I actually wish I would have stayed longer, but I shudder what would have happened if I had opened that door. Last but not the least scary event. Shadow people and other spirits. When I was about 4 or 5 or so I started becoming terrified of something. It was a dark, formless, shadow lady that would crouch at the top of the stairs. For context, my bedroom door would be open and I could see the top of the stairs from my bed, with long, what I can only assume to be, hair and long claws. She had red lights for eyes and my first interaction with her was when we moved into that house. Originally I didn't start off by seeing it. It would be little things like shuffling at night, or it would call my name and tell me to go downstairs, and it would say that in my mother's voice. I responded the first time and went downstairs and found nothing. It happened about 3 times or so before I told my mother about it, as I thought she was playing tricks on me. She told me that it would be okay and that I had nothing to worry about. Then I saw her. Whatever it was. It appeared at the top of the stairs and would stare at me in my bed for hours. It would whisper to me, and talk to me in my mother's voice. It would appear in the early and never during the day or early night. It kept happening for months and months until it got worse. My mother was working on getting her social work degree, so she was usually up in her office that was across from my room. I don't remember this next part. I am recalling this from what she told me years after this happened. She heard me get up very late one night and she wanted to see if I needed anything. As she left her office she saw me walking with my eyes open looking terrified. She asked me what I was doing. I said that she called me to go downstairs. At this point my mother was terrified. She took me to get therapy in a nearby town and hoped for the best. The therapist claimed it could be that I had an overactive imagination and that I would grow out of it. My mother took solace in that and figured the therapy was going to work. It was about a month or so later that I walked for the second time ever in my life, or since, and tried to walk down the stairs again. My mother ran to me this time and grabbed me as I was at the edge of the stairs about to plummet down. She woke me up the next day and she had tears in her eyes. She told me that if anything happened from then on that I was to tell her from start to finish. That weekend she took off to her job out of town. We lived in a very small town so there wasn't much work. That weekend I woke up and heard shuffling downstairs. Maybe it was my stepfather, or perhaps my mother had stayed home sick. I head into the kitchen and see a kind-looking old man sitting down at the table. Except he wasn't right. He had a pale complexion about him, and his eyes seemed devoid of all life. He reached for me and I sprinted upstairs as fast as I could and started crying. My stepdad came out of his room and asked what was going on. I told him and he said that I must have been dreaming. I told him I was awake and that I had been for quite a while, but as per usual he didn't believe me. My stepfather was not one to believe in the supernatural. Fast forward a few more months of going through that and waking up in the middle of the night seeing her, staring at me with those beady red light eyes, and we finally moved out due to the emotional stress it had put on all of us and another job opportunity that my mother had been offered. I hadn't experienced anything for years and it wasn't until I turned 18 that my mother started to see it as well. It was a late night. I had just gotten back from hanging out with some friends and I used the bathroom right outside of my parents' bedroom. Their door was open and they could see the hallway well. As I'm relieving myself my mother knocks on the door. I ask what is going on and she asks me who is in the bathroom with me angrily. The hair on my arm starts to stiffen and stand straight up. I tell her no one and I ask why she would ask that. She tells me that she saw my best friend Alex go in there with me. That in fact he had been holding onto my shoulders as we walked into the bathroom, and right before we went in he smiled at her, maliciously. She was worried about me. I opened the bathroom door and told her no one had come home with me. She looked around and once she confirmed it with herself she told me that she was scared and went back to bed. That was the first time someone else had seen something following me and it terrified me as I usually feel as though something is following me at a very close pace at night, usually at about 4 feet behind me or closer. I had largely forgotten about the shadow woman as it was heavily traumatic, but then something happened. It was my cousin that made me remember everything. His name was Jake and he was a very young and positive person. He had moved into that house about 3 years ago now as he had started working at a job in the town and wanted to be closer to it. He asked my family and my aunt, not knowing about our experiences there, told him that house would be perfect. He lived there for about a year, and I'm not sure what he experienced or if he experienced anything in that time, but after that year of him living there I got a call from my other cousin Anthony. He told me Jake had passed away. I asked how it had happened and he said the police couldn't figure it out and they ruled it as a suicide. Apparently in the dead of the night he decided to light the house on fire, get in his truck, drive 30 feet, while driving unload 3 shots of his pistol into his chest, and swerve into the ditch. Now the thing that does not make sense to me is he shot himself in the chest, and did it 3 times? Not only that, but he burnt that house down and he didn't even own it. He was one of the most positive and happy people I've ever met. He had a kid and a wife to support as well. When I heard all the news it just didn't make sense. Then I got the sense of dread as to why he would get rid of that house. I just hope that he truly got rid of the horrors that were inside. Fast forward a few years and I'm currently 21, and I've been recently getting dreams about an old woman who pounces out at me and I wake up terrified. It wouldn't mean anything to me, but on the same night my roommate, let's call her Emily, had gotten a very eerily similar dream. We both described the woman and she was the exact same in both of our dreams. Except hers was slightly different. She had seen that old woman and a shadowy figure. The figure tried to pull her feet at the end of the bed and she had woken up. The same night I had the dream about the same old lady that had woken me up and terrified me. A withered old lady with rags for a dress, a weathered complexion, gray hair, and a mischievous yet playful manner. I'm scared I may see the shadow person again. The last time I heard her I told her to go away.